Coming up on Network Africa. Police clash with looters in South Africa's township of Alexandra in Johannesburg a day after violence hit other parts of the city. 15 people die in Mali after a 3-story building collapsed in the capital, Bamako. Plus, Zimbabwe state doctors go on strike after the government fails to meet their demands for higher pay. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboali. Begin today in South Africa, where the police have been clashing with looters in the township of Alexandra in Johannesburg, a day after violence hit other parts of the city. Monday's outbreak of violence saw some foreign-owned businesses targeted, a situation that has led to African countries issuing warnings to their citizens. Regional Police Chief Lieutenant General Elias Mawele says that 7 arrests have been made in Alexandria. And here in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has dispatched a special envoy to South Africa to convey to President Cyril Ramaphosa his concerns on the alleged xenophobic attacks on Nigerians living in the country. The special envoy will also interact with his South African counterpart on the situation. This comes after the president had early instructed the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, to summon the South African High Commissioner to Nigeria and get a brief on the situation. He expressed Nigeria's displeasure over the treatment of its citizens and asked for assurance of the safety of their lives and property. The special envoy is expected to arrive in Pretoria latest Thursday, September the 5th. Meanwhile, a number of other African countries have expressed their concern and issued warnings to their citizens following the outbreak of violence in South Africa. The Ethiopian embassy in South Africa has advised its citizens to close their businesses during the ongoing tension that has seen shops in the commercial hub Johannesburg looted and set ablaze. It also says that Ethiopians are advised to distance themselves from any confrontation and conflict and not go out with expensive jewelry. Also, Zambia's transport ministry says that lorry drivers should avoid traveling to South Africa until the security situation improves. The statement refers to reported attacks on foreign lorry drivers where several vehicles have been looted. And in the meantime, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has condemned the violence, mostly targeting foreigners in the main city, Johannesburg, saying it must stop immediately. He said the violence was mutating and taking different forms and was bad for South Africa. He adds that whatever grievances people have, they should be dealt with in a democratic way, and there can be no justification for any South African to attack people from other countries.
Now, I'd like to condemn the violence that has been spreading around a number of provinces in our country in the strongest terms. The attacks on people who run businesses from foreign nationals is something that's totally unacceptable. It's something that we cannot allow to happen in South Africa, where people who are running their own businesses are attacked and their businesses are destroyed through looting and being firebombed, something that is completely against the ethos that we as South Africans espouse. And there can be no justification whatsoever about what people are having a grievance over, that they should go out and attack people from other countries. Because when they do so here, they should also know that fellow South Africans will be attacked in other countries. We are a country that is completely committed against xenophobia. We do not allow and cannot tolerate the attacks on people from other African countries and indeed from other countries completely. So these attacks are completely against the rule of law, and we want our security forces to carry on with the work that they've been doing, arresting the perpetrators, ensuring that these violent acts do not continue.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking there. Well, now let's get more on this story from the CEO of Afro Visionary Legacy based in South Africa, Lebogang Chaka. Thanks for joining us on the program. So what would you say is responsible for these constant xenophobic attacks witnessed in South Africa?
Good day. Thank you for having me on the show. I think from my perspective, I believe that there's 25 years later after freedom, there's rising levels of inequality in South Africa, where the expectations were not met of many South Africans in terms of how they will see the new dispensation after 1994. I mean, there's a famous Time magazine cover where we have Primrose on the other side, which is the leafy suburbs, and on the other side you have informal settlements. And you begin to see that South Africa making the list of one of the most unequal countries in the world. And these rising level of inequality, lack of opportunities, has now really created great social dissatisfaction. And it's really at the center of fueling what we see.
Well, a number of reasons actually given for the attacks on foreigners include them stealing jobs from South Africans, some have said, and committing crimes. How is the South African government and the security agencies reacting to these allegations?
At the moment, we've been seeing our president has issued a statement condemning the violence, and we really see, senior members of government, such as our Minister of Police, Bekele, being deployed and on the ground in the police stations, in the communities, and trying to understand what is going on, calling for calm, and really, from a government perspective, we are seeing a lot of issuing of statements to say that they condemn the violence. Even a couple of weeks back, there was an incident in Soweto where we saw one of our major cities, townships in South Africa, where we saw the mayor going in and interacting with the people on the ground and so forth. So we've been informed by the Minister of Police that really all levels of government have been briefed, and it really remains to be seen what then becomes the more proactive strategy, and rather not focus on a reactive strategy, because some of these has been told forth a while ago, and we need to find a solution as a country.
Yeah, Lebogang, we did have Cyril Ramaphosa react, saying that, the violence has to stop. But today we had South Africa's High Commissioner to Nigeria, Mr. Monroe, describe these attacks as sporadic acts of violence, actually arguing that businesses belonging to other South Africans were also affected. Would it be right now to say the South African government and the security forces also seem to be in some way supporting the xenophobic attacks, considering the fact that up until now, not much is being done to stop them?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're supporting it, because if they were supporting it, I don't think they would be coming out condemning and really calling for peace and calm, and also the fact that we really do see high, profile government officials deployed to go and have conversations with the communities. What I do think, though, is I would say that there needs to be a comprehensive plan in terms of capacity building, particularly for South Africans to learn how to deal with their issues, and how to really have constructive conversations if they are disgruntled. Because when you trace the history of our country to even back to pre-1994, before the New Dawn dispensation, you see South Africans following the same pattern. You see them going out in the street. They used to do something called necklacing, where if they believed someone was a spy, even if they were black, they would put a tire and they would burn that person. So I'm not excusing their behavior. I just feel that there needs to be a more comprehensive plan in terms of also assisting our African migrants that are displaced. We also need to look at what kind of legal assistance do we give in terms of some of the migrants and some of these people that are suffering, human rights, atrocities at this point in time. But I think as a country, we need to come up with a more comprehensive plan as to how do we deal with this violence. Because the same violence, you see them doing the same thing, looting and so forth. If there's service delivery protests, there's schools that are burnt and so forth. So it's also a greater societal problem that we as a country need to deal with.
All right, then, Libogam Chaka, South African Affairs Analyst, thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa today. Moving on to other stories, now 15 people have been confirmed dead in Mali after a 3-story building collapsed in the country's capital, Bamako. The residential building, which was under construction but had people living there, fell down in the early hours of Sunday. The death toll has continued to rise as firefighters extract men, women, and children from the rubble. Officials say 26 people survived with various degrees of injuries. The government adds that a lack of respect for construction standards is the likely cause of the collapse. Building collapses are common in Bamako, one of the fastest growing cities in the world, where a construction boom has driven many to be built without permits. And in Kenya, 7 bodies have been recovered after a tour group was swept away by a flash flood in the country's national park. Officials say the incident at Hell's Gate National Park on Sunday involved 5 Kenyan nationals, a local tour guide and a foreigner. All of the missing persons have been found and the search and rescue operation has been called off. The park, which is about 100 kilometers northwest of the capital, Nairobi, remains closed. These 7 people recovered were part of a 13-strong group that was visiting the park.
Rescue will come, but nothing, and then next minute I see family going one after the other. So my driver was next to me, we caught each other, and there's one guide, and there's a Kenyan couple, and my other niece was with us. So we held on to each other for 1 hour, 30 minutes. And then when the water slowed down and it reduced the flow, we decided to run. We ran upwards. We all got stuck in the quicksand. We thought we were gone.
Away from Kenya, Gabon's government says President Ali Bongo has not been admitted to a hospital in London, but is on a private visit to London where he will undergo routine medical checks. The 60-year-old is recovering from a stroke that he had while on a trip to Saudi Arabia last October. A statement from the presidency says, quote, "At no point in time has the president's health worsened. On the contrary, he is on his way to the full recovery of his physical abilities," end of quote. Bongo's state of health has been the subject of fierce speculation as the leader has made few appearances and spoken only a few words in public since returning in March after treatment overseas. The United Nations has promised to strengthen the operational capacity of the peacekeeping force in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where attacks on health workers and Ebola facilities have undermined efforts to stop the spread of the virus. In a meeting with President Felix Tshisekedi, the UN chief Antonio Guterres acknowledged that the security situation in Eastern DR Congo is far from resolved and says it could worsen without the UN peacekeepers. Last year, former President Joseph Kabila called for the peacekeepers to leave, arguing that their mission had failed to restore peace in the country. Some 16,000 peacekeepers are deployed in the country, making it one of the largest UN missions in the world.